Snow was falling in a gentle, quiet drift when Ethan Bell first saw the two small figures standing by his fence. The light was fading in the west, the sky turning the color of cooled ashes, and the wind carried the scent of pine from the far ridge. He had been walking back from the stable, his hand covering stiff with cold, when the shapes appeared from the pale curtain of snow. Two little girls in worn leather dresses, the bottom edges stiff and dark from frost. They stood close together, hand in hand, as though the air itself might pull them apart. One taller, perhaps 8 years old, had her hair in two loose braids, black as a raven's wing, the ends frayed. The smaller one, maybe 5, pressed her face into the older girl's side, peeking out with wide, dark eyes that shone like wet stones. Ethan stopped a dozen paces from them, his breath fogging in the dimming air. The taller one spoke first, her voice carrying only because the wind stopped for a moment. "Our mother is sick, sir. We'll clean your cabin to feed her." The words were simple, but something in the way she said them, a kind of firm seriousness, caught at him. The younger girl lifted her head just enough to nod. Her lips looked blue from cold. Ethan didn't move. 1,000 thoughts moved through him instead, questions he didn't ask because he could see in their faces the weight of whatever answer they might give. Where was their father? Why were they alone out here? Why come to him, a man who kept to himself and had little to offer but a roof, a rifle, and a few head of cattle? He cleared his throat. "Where is your house?" The older girl glanced toward the distant slope beyond the river, where the pines grew denser. "Not far," she said. "An old hut." "Did it belong to you?" She shook her head once quickly. "Belonged to a trapper. He's gone. Mama can't walk far now." He shifted his weight, feeling the snow sink under his boot soles. He didn't take in strays, and he didn't get involved in other people's troubles, especially not the kind that came with native heritage. He could almost hear the voices in town if he brought them under his roof, the narrowing of eyes, the muttered warnings about taking on burdens not his own. "Do you have relatives?" he asked. The younger one clung harder to her sister's dress. The elder just said, "No." He should have sent them on their way. He told himself that twice. But the younger girl coughed into her sleeve, a small, harsh sound, and the sound of it followed him, even as he turned his head toward the ridge. He pictured their mother as they'd left her, maybe wrapped in a worn-out blanket, alone with the cold creeping in through the gaps in the walls. "Show me," he said. The elder girl's shoulders eased almost unnoticeably. She led, holding her sister's hand, cutting a narrow path through the deep snow toward the dark line of trees. The air bit at Ethan's cheeks as they walked, the sun sinking completely now, leaving the snow to glow faintly in the dusk. Every few steps, one of the girls glanced back, as if checking to make sure he hadn't disappeared. They reached a clearing where an old trapper's shack slumped under the weight of snow. A thin ribbon of smoke rose from the crooked chimney, but it was the kind of smoke that spoke of damp wood and embers barely alive. The elder girl pushed open the door, and Ethan ducked inside. The air was heavy with the smell of smoke, herbs, and cold earth. Near the far wall, on a heap of blankets, lay a woman. She was young, younger than he'd expected, perhaps not more than 29. Her hair, long and black, spilled across the fabric in waves, tangled in places. Her face was flushed with fever, lips dry. The blanket around her was thin, patched in several places with hide. She stirred when the girls knelt beside her, their small hands fussing over her. Her eyes opened, dark, deep-set, and found Ethan standing in the shadows. She said something in her native tongue, her voice little more than a whisper. He didn't know the words, but the tone carried a question. "I'm Ethan Bell," he said quietly. "Your girls approached me." She tried to sit up, but the effort brought a shiver through her frame. He stepped forward, pulling his coat from his shoulders and draping it over her. She stiffened at the movement, not from a cold, he thought, but from the instinct of someone who had learned to flinch before touch. "Have you been unwell long?" he asked. 3 days, she managed, her English soft, halting. "You can't remain here," he told her. "The cold will finish what the sickness started." Her eyes darted to her daughters. then back to him. "No one will offer help." "They came to me," he said, "so I will." He helped her to her feet, careful of her weight, feeling the heat of her fever through the coat. Outside, the snow had begun to fall harder, thick flakes catching in her hair. The girls followed close as they made their way back to his cabin, their footprints the only marks on the white stretch of ground. Inside his cabin, the air was warmer, scented faintly with coffee and wood smoke. He settled her in the chair nearest the hearth, the girls huddling on the rug in front of the fire. He brought bread and a pitcher of milk, setting them on the low table. The girls ate quickly, but without greed, their mother watching, hands folded in her lap. "You should eat," he said to her. "Later," she murmured. "They first." He noticed her hands, work roughened, the knuckles chapped, small scars across the backs. When he brushed a bit of snow from her hair, she flinched again, though not as sharply as before. A knock came at the door. Ethan opened it to find Jim Carson, a neighbor from 2 miles south, his eyes flicking from Ethan to the woman by the fire. "Are you certain you wish to be doing that?" Jim asked, his voice low, carrying an edge. "Townspeople won't approve." Ethan didn't answer. He closed the door. That night, when the girls were asleep by the hearth, he set a plate of stew in front of the woman. She hesitated, then took a bite. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the spoon, but she finished the bowl. When she looked at him afterward, it was with an expression he couldn't read, something between disbelief and gratitude. Days passed into weeks. The girls laugh more now, their voices soft but brighter. The woman, Maya, he learned, mended his torn shirts, her stitches neat and sure. He showed them how to tend the horses, and Sarah, the elder girl, took to it with quiet pride. The trouble came one morning, sharp as a winter wind. 3 riders appeared at the edge of the yard, native men, their eyes hard, their voices clipped when they spoke. They claimed the girls and their mother belonged to the tribe, that she had no right to stay here. Ethan stood on the porch, his revolver resting easy at his hip. "They are staying," he said, his voice even. The men glanced at one another, sizing him up. Something in his stance and the way he didn't blink made them think better of pressing. They turned their horses and rode off, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the snow-laden distance. That night, Maya sat by the fire, her fingers tracing the rim of her tin cup. "You didn't have to," she said. "Didn't have to what?" "Take our side." He shook his head. "You think I rescued you? The truth is you and those girls saved me from living in silence." She looked at him for a long moment, the firelight catching in her eyes. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She didn't flinch this time. Instead, she leaned into his hand just enough for him to feel the warmth of her cheek. The girls, curled under a quilt by the hearth, were already asleep, their breathing slow and even. Ethan rose, tucking the quilt around them, then turned back to Maya. Snow pressed against the window in soft, relentless flurries. Inside, the fire burned steady, and for the first time in years, the cabin felt like it belonged to more than just him. He held her gaze a moment longer, then said quietly, "Winter doesn't continue forever." And to you, listening to this from somewhere far away, maybe you know this truth already. Maybe you've lived it. Sometimes the family you keep isn't the one you planned for. Sometimes the door you open in a moment of hesitation changes everything. Out here on the plains, kindness is the only thing you can plant in the frozen ground and still see it flourish. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating Wild West tales. Also, let us know in the comments where you're listening to the story and what time it is.